someone move item 1.02?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? I am a yes.
Mrs. Elbegore,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeGelorme, not here yet, Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
and we're missing Mr. Cordone. Okay.
Thank you. So public forum, this is a reminder that as we're online with public forum, we would ask people that would like to address an issue with the board to do so via our email, which can be found on the district website, or it is clerk@Fulton. Oh, wait a minute. Here I go again. Mrs. Perry,
Yep.
clerk@Fulton. .nyric.org.
Correct.
Okay. So if you could submit to that email, someone will get back to you as soon as possible. Would someone now move item 1.04?
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Okay. Let's see, Mrs. Elbegore,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall.
Yes.
I think Nick is looking for the link, so let me send that over to him.
Okay. So this brings us to President's Report, and the first thing up is the August 25th meeting. And right now, we're scheduled to do that through live stream. However, I wanted to ask each of you your opinion about meeting in person versus live stream, and we should have that discussion and figure out when we want to return. We know we can do live stream until I think it's the 4th of September. We're good right now. So jump in if you have an opinion.
I prefer to still do what we're doing as long as we can, if that's possible.
I prefer the first meeting, the second Tuesday in September when school starts.
When school starts, okay.
I can do either.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I'd also prefer to be in a room where there's windows so we can have good cross ventilation.
Thank you. I prefer to do it virtually as long as we can.
Okay. And did Nick make it in?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm sending Dave the link right now.
Okay. The second thing is the convention is going to be all online. And Jean, I think, sent everybody information about that, or if not, she will be.
Yep.
And if it's half the price, and you can pick and choose your events just like you would if you were at convention, but it will be done virtually.
So Robin, will they be doing that during the day, or will they make these meetings at night since it's virtual? Do we know that?
Let me see if I can look that up quick.
I thought I read they were going to have them download so you could see them when you were available.
Okay.
Aha, let's see. Well, I guess I would have to go with what Tim says, because right now I don't have any more information than that.
Robin, I have mine.
Yeah.
And it starts at various times. So one of the days it starts at 9:30 and they go all day long.
Right.
And there's links in there. So you just choose whatever you want to see or be part of during that time period.
Right. Tim was saying that you could possibly download, though, watch it after the fact.
I'll find out about that.
All right. I don't know. David, I know that you just got here, and one of the first questions I had this evening pertained to when and if we start to meet in person. And right now we have till the 4th of September that we can continue to live stream. And what I've heard here is that there are folks that would prefer to live stream, but if we go to in person, then the first meeting in September would be the likely date to start in person meeting. Did I capture that okay?
So are you asking me or giving me information?
I'm doing both. I'm giving you the background, and now you can weigh in on with your opinion, if you would, please.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering how we would include the public if we were meeting in person.
Well, that hasn't been worked out yet.
So can we have that information?
If we are in a large area, then it would go by the 6-foot spacing rule. I don't know, Brian, if you want to weigh in. Brian had some thoughts on how we might do this. There has been a request for.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, good evening, everybody. I think I'll ask Dom to chime in a minute because I'll probably get something wrong. But the problem when we've learned that if we have like 3 of us in what is our boardroom here, and then we're running a remote meeting and we're doing with somebody outside, we have a lot of feedback. So you can't have all the microphones on and all of that. So that's not a real functional way to do it. One of the other things that we thought about, and it doesn't go to what Ms. Abelgore brought up, but it does have excellent ventilation and filters, is our auditorium which does have the system in it with the brand new camera system, which zooms in and can do kinds of things like that. But my understanding there is also the volume or the microphones are a bit of an issue there. Is that correct, Dom? What are your thoughts?
It is. We found a way around that. We can make that work.
See what I never know?
You're speaking of the auditorium. You're speaking of the auditorium at the high school?
Correct.
Yes. And what we would talk about is you could actually do it up on the stage at more than 6 feet, spread it across. And with that new high-powered camera that we have in there, there's the ability to use that, to do that if we were going to do that. I think one of the things we've learned, if anything, is the ability to stream our meetings is something that I think is one of the most important things that we can do. We often talk about communication. When you hear, would we have 225, 230 people at one point at our last meeting? And we've generally been around 30 to 40 in all of our meetings. I think it's something that's extremely valuable. But we have to be strategic about where we do that.
So Dave, your opinion.
I'm fine with what the majority wants to do. I guess I'm just wondering the value of, the what we gain by the physical. I think obviously we have to meet in public, but I guess I'm just wondering if to accommodate what we hope to accommodate in doing that without one.
Okay, you broke up there, Dave, but I think I got most of that about accommodating everybody.
I'm fine. Whatever the majority.
Okay.
So are you?
Well, right now, we only know that we have until the 4th unless the governor extends our ability. So
you're muted.
I guess. Oops. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
so
Robin.
I'm guessing what we should do is plan on meeting in person on the 4th at this time, because we don't know yet if the governor will extend. I too like the notion. I like virtual for a couple of reasons. One is we've had more interaction with folks. I like that a lot. We don't get that in person. Number two, I like the notion that if we're doing it virtual, we're not creating yet another space that needs to be disinfected after our meeting. I do worry about the added burden to our staff as they go behind every activity that occurs to disinfect and prep the buildings for our students and staff. But
We do have
we're
to
going to do
acknowledge
whatever.
the criticism. We have to acknowledge the criticism that, people in the public have faced of, we are comfortable sending the kids back to school, but yet we aren't having board meetings in school as well. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. We do have to talk about it and we have to acknowledge it. And so, it's whatever the board votes. That's why I'm comfortable doing either. But if we're comfortable sending our students in, then we also have to be comfortable showing up as well.
But I do agree with what Dave says, is we do get more people following and being able to be part of the meeting while we do it this way.
Absolutely. But if we're, and I agree with that. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I love that we're able to also pull it up later on YouTube and things like that. But we'd also still be live streaming it, even though we're in the auditorium. Is that right, Dom? You're muted.
Yes.
Sorry, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, great.
But we also are giving them, students options of going virtually too.
Yeah.
So you've got
Yeah. And that might, be an option where we, I know we're talking about doing that with committees is, holding some doing hybrid, holding some in person, but also doing some Zoom. That may be an option that we can discuss and come to, but I just have to put it out there that is a criticism.
And I only think that, and that's the fair one, I just only think that if we were then to be meeting and allowing access to, or the presence of the public with the guidance, at some point we might have to turn people away depending on the venue. Yes. And so I don't know if that's a good thing either, that, we could find ourselves having to turn people away, that, the distancing would not allow for everyone that would want to be present to be there. That's the difference, I think, between our student situation. We know the number versus setting a public meeting.
Plus, I think we have to give this time to figure out what's going to happen and how things are going to evolve before we get into that, I think, in my opinion.
All right. Well, I appreciate this conversation. And so let me show of hands. I think I can do it I can see everybody. Hand up if your preference would be virtual as your first preference. I'm not saying that you wouldn't do in person, but your first preference would be virtual by show of hands. And I'm for. Okay. So we'll see what the governor has to say, and then we'll go from there. But there's 4 of us that would prefer virtual. I just, I have a couple reasons, and some of it's personal, and I don't want to get into it. But all right.
I know you don't want to see me in person.
Not at all, Tim. Not at all. I'm missing a whole bunch of people, to be quite honest. But I've been trying very hard to distance a lot. Okay. So we did that. We did the convention. And Brian, I'm turning it over to you. Thanks, folks.
All right. Thank you and good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's staying cool out there. Warm one today. It's amazing. It doesn't seem like it's been a couple weeks since we last met, but it really is just flying along here. I want to start off by saying that, one of the things that we're really trying to do is we're listening and learning during this as we design and implement a plan at the same time, something that's never been done before. It's very different than opening school than we've ever done before. And I think that's something that's really important, that obviously we want to make decisions and share decisions as quickly as possible. But what we're finding is that as we gather more information, and Robin and I were on a call today with small cities, very interesting hearing from schools across the state going through the same types of things. but are in often the same place we are. Two of the districts were in the process of trying to determine actual numbers of coming, in-person learning and remote learning. Very interesting conversation from different corners of the state. So that was rather interesting. So we continue to try to find ways to gather information. And, when I was looking today, they were sharing, we've done 13 focus groups so far, and we'll cover that in a few minutes just to share. But a lot of things are going on. If you've gone to our website, those are listed on our website. Before I'm going to ask Dan to put up the PowerPoint that we can just get an update, I want to remind us what's the core base of our work. And our strategic plan, interestingly, and thank you to this board, this strategic coherence plan that we have is turning out to be applicable in a COVID environment, which is very interesting. Our goals don't change. One of our primary goals is to have all of our kids by the end of third grade reaching or the 95% or more proficient levels in reading. That's huge. There are other pieces around social emotional learning. There are other pieces around family engagement. There are components around being innovative. And if we're not being innovative in the time we're living in right now, I don't know what we are. And then you look at instruction, and we're looking at instruction differently than we've ever before. If you told us a year ago that we would be using the terms asynchronous and synchronous learning, I think we would be like, wow, we wouldn't have used those terms at that time, not in the way we're using them now. So all of that work then drives our vision, our mission, our beliefs. All of those things don't go away. And I think every decision that we're making is always about all of our kids and creating that access for all of our kids. And then for good measure, the state gave us a lot of documentation and guidance. The NICED was 145 pages of 78 assurances, and Department of Health, they had their component. And what we find is NICED and Department of Health aren't always in sync. So that's been an interesting experience that Robin and I had today, just listening and learning the different points of view across the state from different departments of health in different counties. Last time I looked, we're all in the same state. So that's interesting to go through that. So we're working with all of those pieces at the same time, trying to create a balanced program. And the key points are health and safety of students and staff is number one. That's our priority for the reopening of school, and it will be. And, I think that those are the pieces that have to be there. Excellence and equity of opportunity. We have to make sure that every one of our kids is getting access to an educational experience to the best of our ability. And, oftentimes when you listen to other, places across the state, equity is access through, they can't get the internet. I look at it at equity as much larger than that. Equity is how do you meet those individualized needs of students, those needs where kids need to get contact time. And schools evolved with contact time because the relationship between teachers, educators, and students and families is the key to our whole process. So I think that's a piece. The essential social, emotional, and trauma work that we're doing. One of the things when we've talked to different focus groups is that fear of the unknown, the anxiety that comes with walking into a building for the first time in 6 months. So we're dealing with those feelings of emotion and what can happen here and watching what's happening in different states and all of that. We're gathering information. We're learning from things going on in states in the far south, like, boy, we better not do that. We better do that. And just watching and learning and trying to hone what we're doing. I think the other piece is obviously delivery of instruction. Quality teaching and learning is the other piece. And then the communication piece. We can always get better, and we're continuing to. We're talking about how do you give quick pieces of information. And I know people want more information faster. Sometimes when you go too fast, you give misinformation. And so we want to make sure that we give accurate information, and which leads me to, if you could put the PowerPoint up, Dan, please, if you could, or I could try. Want me to? You gonna pop it up, Dan, or do you want me to? Okay, thank you. And it's not an extensive PowerPoint. It's very deliberate what we're doing. We're pulling up the reins here a little bit. As soon as this shows, we'll go through it. Thank you, Dan. Can the rest of the group see that document? Maybe I can't. There it is. All right. Well, that one's good. This is the 21 reopening update today. Just want to walk us through where we've been so far. We received Department of Health guidance just about the same time we got the NICED guidance. We did family surveys on reopening. It was basis of initial in-person enrollments, transportation projections, trying to get a litmus test at that time. We did administrative team meetings, work groups, meetings with bargaining unit presidents, gathered more information from the staff, district site-based meetings. We did a Board of Education workshop, and then we had to submit. And I will tell you, I was about the most nervous superintendent in the world. Sitting here, Ms. Geithner and Mr. Carroll happened to be in here. When the only thing we've gotten from the Department of Health or NICEAD is nothing. And in response to our submission, and then I shared with you the NISCUS article. That was the first time I had seen that the governor had announced 107 schools hadn't turned their Department of Health document in. And, obviously I never trust those systems. And I was pleased to see that we were not on there. So that was a good thing. So that's the only information that we've gotten. So even though the governor had promised feedback, we have not received any feedback as of yet. So I wanted to make that very clear. I mean, and, I think that's the importance of the work groups or the focus groups that we're going to be doing over the course of this week and next week. And then the other piece here I think is important is that we added an online only portion or option that was added to the plan. That was done August 3rd. And we added that, and then we sent out an online only learning selection form, was distributed to families. Can you turn to the next slide, please? I want to remind us where we were just about a week or on the 29th. And I think the piece that I want to draw the most attention to is the schedule below is subject to change if new information alters our current understanding of our staff and students' intentions to engage in an in-person instruction. And if we exceed those current capacity, which we based it on about 82%, so 80 to 82%. So we were looking, because of our projections, we were showing about a 30%. So that's just, I want to repeat that. We never have hidden that fact. We've put that out there. And so this is what we're doing, because one of the things that we were concerned about, and you can go on to the next one, please, was that we original deadline, and a couple of you had reached out to me, and thank you for doing that. Obviously, you receive information from different people. We receive different, but all together, it gives us a pretty good feel for what's going on. And so what we did was we've extended that deadline to the 13th. As of this morning at 9 a.m., we had gotten 575 individual student requests, and 350 families is what that represents. So, and if you saw it broken down by grade levels, we averaged somewhere between 17% and 22%. So in some grade levels, you have a little bit higher numbers so far. This afternoon, I happen to have to go pick up a cord from my phone just over here at one of our local businesses. And the father asked me the question, so are we even opening school? And what it told me is that there are families, and it reinforces what we're doing, which is between today and the 13th at 8 p.m., we're going to extend the deadline for the submission online only requests. And then what we're going to be doing, we've met with our principals and they felt extremely strong about this, is that we want to make sure that our families are aware of this information. And so what they're going to be doing.
Brian, is the family category, does that include families with multiple students in the system?
Yes. So the 350 families represents the 575 kids. Does that make sense, Dave?
Now it does. Thanks.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Brian, I'm confused. This submission, is this the same survey that we based the 30%, the COVID reopening survey? Is that? No, on Monday, August 3rd, we sent out, on Monday, August 3rd, we sent a very targeted piece of information to all. And again, that all means everybody that's in our systems. Right. And for that it was a specific request for online only. So, Ms. Cooper, if you wanted your children to go online, you would have filled out the form. But if Mr. Cordone said, gee, I really want my kids in school, he wouldn't have even responded. It was specifically for that. It was nothing else. It was very targeted information. And so what we want to do now is our each of the schools is going to be, and what we have, what's on that request form that's different than a survey, is that on this request form, you would have actually written, Ms. Cooper,
and my kids, right? And their grade levels or how that was filled out. And Mr. Cordone wouldn't have responded at all because he's comfortable sending his students to school. So, but are we comfortable at an 18%? Is that an accurate number in our community? Because if it is, that means we have to adjust our hybrid model. And we were clear that we may need to do that. So we want to make sure that we have as accurate information as possible so that when we finalize the plan and we get rolling out, we can really then start by early next week assigning students to building, their classrooms, staff to classes, all of those pieces that everybody is wanting and needing information on, and also running our bus routes and all of those kinds of things. So, but I think taking up the reins for 2 or 3 days to make sure that we have that information. The other thing we've done is on Friday that we'll do that. The other thing we've built in, next slide, please. Maybe. There we go. We've also, what we did was initially we were going to do more parent forums. Even though we've done 13, it's the right thing to do. And the governor is indicating if you did them before the 7th, they don't count. But we would have done them anyway. We're talking about them. We're going to schedule 2 on August 13th at 3 and 6. So if families have questions, we'll be running 2 forums. We try to do one mid-afternoon and evening. And then August 20th, we'll do the same thing. Obviously, I see us doing more forums even as we get a little bit closer to opening, but then the staff forum as well on the 13th, because I believe after we get a model out, that's when our staff will really be having a lot of questions as we go through. And then we have student forums scheduled for tomorrow, actually. So it's an opportunity for us to make sure we have accurate information. I mean, we could have gone with the information we had this morning, and we would have had to make an adjustment. And I believe that we need to do this. I know there's another school district to our south, and I believe they did the same thing. They based it on that. I believe our district, we could have done this easy. We could have said, here's the model, we're going to do it this way, and we're ready to roll. But in Fulton, we try to figure out a way to make sure that we're maximizing the opportunities to bring kids in. And I think that's a piece. The other piece that I'm very sensitive to, and is that parents need the opportunity to think about childcare. If I had my number one choice, would be around 100% on day one, and we'd be ready to roll and be wonderful, because that's what is the best for education. But unfortunately, in the times we are, we have to do that. But I also want to get this information to our parents. And then we are also looking at how can we bolster and provide opportunities in the child care domain as well. So those are the pieces that we're putting in place. That's why I've requested, and I thank Ms. Griffin for reaching out. She reached out to each of you today, and we do have a special workshop scheduled for Monday evening. And I think that's a pivotal thank you for that and your flexibility, because that will be the night whatever we end up with this data on Friday, when we have to tweak and tighten our plan down to go with the numbers that we have, we'll be confident that we reached out the best we could to make sure that we're developing a model that maximizes every opportunity we have. And that's not me making any comments about anywhere else. I can only want to speak to Fulton. But I believe what we're going to do by holding up a little bit is to make sure that we can honor our goals and our strategic coherence plan, and more importantly, provide the best possible experience that we can during these difficult times for our kids. And now I'll be quiet because I'm sure there's a lot of questions. Is there another slide? I don't believe there is, but I can't tell if Dave. Yeah. Thank you for participating. Go ahead, Ms. Cooper.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear. When we're talking about adjusting the hybrid model, we're at 18% and we estimated 30%. We're talking about changing the days that the children are reporting to school. Is that correct?
So obviously that's one of the options, because if we have more kids than we planned for, which obviously very clear what the social distancing with physical distancing, it looks like it's about 12 and on average in every classroom. We have some slight classrooms that might be bigger, maybe 13, maybe a 14 at the high school. In some instances, a little bit larger. They have a couple larger rooms there as well that could accomplish up to 18 to 19. But our elementary schools, predominantly 12. And so if we have 48 kids, if we end up saying we need 60, then obviously that doesn't work and need to adjust that. So then what we're going to do is we'll look at the numbers at each grade level, and we can see how can we best accommodate all of the kids. It seems to be, and we're looking at pre-K actually through 12, and we're collecting that evidence to make sure that we're making accurate decisions and that our models are as functional as possible starting on day one.
So are we looking at models primarily, adjusting the hybrid model primarily at the elementary level, or are we also considering adjusting at the secondary level?
It looks to be predominant. If you remember, I know Dan doesn't have it up there, but on our hybrid model for 6th grade through 12th grade, it's 2-day. It's at 6th to 8th grade, it's all virtual, and then AABB.
Yeah.
Very easy. That's flexible. That's a very flexible model, and also at 9 through 12. So 6 through 12 lent itself to much more flexibility. When you get into the elementary level, and you start to have the kids in more and more, that's where you have less flexibility. So we're looking at it pre-K through 12. When you look at the K6 there, that's what we're doing. And then what happens is at K5 right now, they're in person 4 days a week. 6, 8, you can see like it doesn't really affect us with the split models 6 through 12. Where you start to get tight with the flexibility and where those percentages are the most important is K through 5.
Is K through 5. And
so really the changes, I just want to clarify because that was a good question, Valen. So really the hybrid will be there. It will look different than originally thought, perhaps at the elementary, the K5 or the pre-K5 level. The secondary will still look the same in terms of the number of students that will be in the building. It won't be impacted or won't be required to change as much.
Correct. Right? I mean, with the resources that we have, I think what we have to look at is we have to really look at all those numbers and then make those adjustments that best meet the needs. And as you can see, 6 through 12 is a much more flexible model. When you bring the kids in every day, you have less flexibility in those numbers. So that's what we're looking at. And that's where, again, we could find that we end up going that 18% number that I shared a few minutes ago, where we're at 9 a.m. this morning. It may be a little higher than that by now, or not. And then coupled with today, what we did was we did a robocall that went out, and the robocall said, hey, basically look for a correspondence from your principals today. And we sent a correspondence. I hope it got out. I guess I'll find out in a few minutes when I ask our parents on the committee, on the board. I shared with the board those correspondences. We sent one to families and we sent one to staff today. And in there, it talked about the link. It talked about the meetings this Thursday and next week. So it was in a way to say, give them a look for, to say it's coming. So I guess the long-winded answer to your question is there's more flexibility at the 6th to 12th grade level, and the K5 is much more connected to our percentages. Because our goal was to get
in terms of building capacity and usage, I know that we've leased space at Volney to city. There's no additional space anywhere that can change the number of kids we can have at a time. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually not a space issue. It's not a space issue as much as it is a faculty issue. And you can't, I mean, when you think about that, it's a faculty issue. And you take our average class size is somewhere between 22 and 25, depending on the grade levels and the classes. We try to keep it as low as possible, but that seems to be where we ride. So if you let's use an even number. If the number is 24 in each classroom, at an elementary school, in the world that we're living in right under the state guidance and the Department of Health guidance, we're looking at a maximum of 12, in our classrooms. So that's how that would be. So you think about that. So if you remember where presentations are on the budget, we always talk about the number of sections and things like that. And so we have 3 elementary schools with 3 sections at K through 6, and we have one building that has 2. But then you have to remember those classrooms all have, let's say, on average of 24. So now you got to take all those in half and split them all in half, and you run out of resources to do that. So that's why, and the spaces as well, because think about it, you take one class and turn it into two if you're in site every day, whereas at the middle school level, you can use the same classrooms on A and B days. And obviously, you're probably aware of that type of model, Mr. Cordone, in your world.
How did we not? Oh, go ahead, Brenda.
Can I ask you a question? If we had to change our hybrid model and make it less days in class for our younger students, is there help for families to find childcare? Like, do we have groups made like through the Y or something that we might?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I've heard that it's been very hard for parents to find that childcare because they're not normally in it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. Ms. Geithner, do you want to talk about that? Because I'm doing a lot of talking, or I can talk.
Sure. We have collaborated with our community partners, including the Y, Oswego County Opportunities, reached out to Catholic Charities, and also are looking at our community school advisory. Liz Tiffany met with them today, and that was the topic of their conversation. So we're looking to put together resources and share information with families to help them with that, and also looking at how we can be partners with those community-based organizations to meet that need.
Ms. Geithner, in our community schools grant, is that helpful in this possibility?
We can look at how we can utilize those funds for after school, what would be considered after school programming. And we do have certified space here at the junior high. It would just be a matter of whether or not we could safely bring students in to support that need and when we could do that.
But that's based on this.
Sorry, Valen.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Just to go off of that real quick, is that information that will go out to the families so they know, because they may not know to reach out to us if they're having those issues, childcare issues.
Once we have clear picture
as
of what
soon as we get
can
the
offer.
model, that's one of the areas that's as important as the model, the instructional model. I think also, I don't know if you woke up this morning and turned on channel 3, there's always something about schools every day, but today the focus was actually on childcare, and they were actually interacting. So it's a very important piece of what we're trying to do and very much a part of our conversation here.
But they're basing their information on our current schedule, correct? Because if we have to change this model, and this is the concern that I'm having, is if we have to limit the amount of days because we don't have the room to put the kids in there, that's going to change the price of after, like the SACC that the YMCA runs. That's going to change the price because those kids are going to be there more hours and more days. How soon are we going to be able to get this model to them so they know how much care they're able to provide to the community?
So Monday night, the purpose of the budget of the workshop is to roll this out to everybody in the community. And part of that plan will be as much as we can do around and as much update as we can provide around childcare. And that's a big part because we recognize the fact that if you pull back the opportunities that that our families were thinking about for 4 days a week, and if we had to adjust that and reduce the number of days, we do recognize the fact that that does that. And it was the first conversation that we had this morning when we were looking at those numbers, and we've been following them all weekend and since they went out last week every day. And that was one of the pieces. That's why Jerry was able to speak to, the work that we're doing with the different agencies. And we're also looking at what we can do possibly internally as well with our community schools to maximize space and develop a balanced program, recognizing the fact that childcare is a huge challenge for many of our families.
Right. And the question is that based on this current model, or is there an alternative model with reduced days that we're currently working on?
So Valen, there's a couple of things going on right now. We came together as an administrative team this morning as we started to have that real deep conversation about, are we going to have to modify a plan? Are we moving ahead as is? And we started to look at the number of families we truly heard from. And that's when we decided that we really needed to do a full out campaign to make sure we heard from everyone. And one of the things that I think is important, I was just in the document looking, we've gotten responses from, at least another 50 plus parents who, now that we're making that, they're able to ask some questions and individually talk and make some better decisions. So we may not even have to change anything. We don't know that yet. So I just want to reassure everyone in the community that's watching that the reason it's so important that we have accurate data to work with, and we said that a lot during the forums, because we want to make sure we're making our decisions based on the facts. And so by getting the facts, we're going to be able to do that. We don't know at this second in time what that's going to be, and that's why next Monday will be so important. But right now, we can't say, because we realized we missed a step. And so our building administrators are all out helping us get the right information at the elementary. I think parents feel better about that. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I know, we can always second guess how the survey kind of was constructed or what we were looking for. And I'm just wondering if it wouldn't have been better to ask every family to respond for which model they would prefer. Because it's hard to guess whether there may be families that just haven't even paid attention to. I know there was an effort today, because I did get two calls, so your efforts are working for some parents anyway. But I'm just thinking there are some parents that may not have even gotten a call. You know what I mean? Depending if their information was accurate in school tool.
Correct.
And then, you might not hear from them. Do you know what I mean? And they might be unaware that you're seeking their input.
You are 100% correct.
If we had solicited from everyone, then they would have all been required to respond in some fashion, and then you'd know from the. That's all right. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I want to reassure everyone too that I'm going to say I dropped the ball. Brian, before he left on his break, did ask, did we do a mailing? And we had a lot of staff out, and that's not excuses, but I'm going to say I made a mistake and did not follow up with the mailing, because I'm thinking of the parent Brian said he heard from today. So I will take that one on the chin. But in doing that, we now this morning, I think coming together and realizing we needed to make those phone calls, I think is going to help us get the right information, Fallon, so that before, we're going to go into the weekend having some accurate data. And even though there's so much we can't answer yet and people are frustrated, we're constantly working on trying to get those answers. So I just want to reassure, and I know every parent I talk to, it's a tough time to be a parent. Like it's a tough time to be a grandparent. Robin and I talk about that too, because people are making decisions and there is no wrong decision here. It's what is going to work for the children and their families.
Betsy, I don't think that fault's on you. I don't think a mailing was needed. I was just looking over the data, and I think we compiled the data wrong, in my opinion. When you're looking at the stats, we had 1,400 responses, and only 7%, so about 98 people said no, absolutely not.
Right.
Compiling the data, we had 20% that said they weren't sure, but they were thinking no. It looks like we included that in the definite no pile. If you average those two out, we only get about a 12% response of a no. And so we missed the mark by thinking that those people wouldn't, without calling them to confirm. I don't think this is a problem with you.
Communication.
And yes.
Well, but then I would say that rests with me in getting it out wrong as the EDIA. So we need to fix this, and we need to fix it fast. That's what I'm going to say. And we will, because our parents deserve that, and we will.
Betsy and Brian, are we finding that our district is consistent with the hybrid models across the county? And if others are offering everyday instruction or more, how are they able to do it? What are the barriers that we have that they don't have?
Well, and Brian, I don't know if you want
can
me to
answer. I can answer
we have been
afterwards.
Okay. Brian and I have been reviewing plans and talking to superintendents, and actually when I, had my accident yesterday and was at the doctor's, I was talking to children from all over and getting views on what schools were going to be doing and what they were looking like. And I know Brian's been doing the same thing, and we have many teachers who have children in other districts. So there are a few things that are our barriers. Some is our size. We're in that middle level with our building size and with our students. We have students who, we want to get everyone in as much as possible, but then we're not able to do that everywhere. Part of it is our understanding of instruction and what that, the kids are being instructed, even though it may not be traditional instruction. So there's a lot evolving. So Dave, I don't think it's a one easy answer. But again, different districts are handling this very differently. I mean, of the 7, you talked about being on small cities today, Brian. Mm-hmm. There is no one formula that's working for everyone.
Right, and I concur with Betsy. I mean, I agree with those things. I look at the plans. I think in some cases, the model that we ran for 6 through 12 was relatively easy to do in any district. And we could have done that. We could have started with that. But I guess I want to go back to where I started from. Our plan indicates that at the primary level, we want our kids coming out of elementary school with the strongest reading and literacy, math and literacy skills that we can. And if there's anything that we know, we also know that our data in this area shows great gaps for our kids, and the opportunity to have our kids in as much as possible was key. When you see that data and when you put it out there, you hope that you had 27, I believe it was actually 26% were actually leaning no. And then there was the no's. I believe, wasn't it 23? Excuse me?
I think it was 20.2%.
The total was about 28%, right?
With the no. With
That's
the
right.
no and the thinking no combined was about 27.5%, 28%.
Yep. And that was the number that we used. Right or wrong, that's the number that we used. And I know there's another district that used that, and they're looking at the same thing. And that district also focused on not going with a model where you could just split them, but an opportunity to design a model to try to maximize the time with kids. And I think that's what our model's trying to do. And if there's anything that we're trying to do here in Fulton, is we recognize the fact that we have a wide range of kids, and wherever you are on that continuum, we need to provide an educational experience that we best can in this situation that challenges them and hopefully prepares them for a world that probably is going to be very different than the one that we're all living in right now. So I think we can say what we didn't do and what we haven't done, but what we have to focus on is, at the moment, I want to make sure that we get accurate information, that we put out a model that we know works. We were very upfront in the bolding that we may have to adjust that. So it's not that we didn't talk about that. And I want to make sure that when we walk in here in September, that our kids, when they walk in person or online for the first time, that we're prepared.
And I think your point
Dave,
earlier
you're breaking up
here when I had asked a question about, oops, I can't fix that. Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Nope.
You earlier you said that even space wasn't the issue, but it's really staffing. And so I think it's important for us that we really are very lean in terms of as far as we can with staff, and that's another. I guess what I'm hearing is that's confining as well. There's no place to spread students to create multiple. Is that right?
Right. We are maximizing all of our spaces in the buildings. And I mean, I think we've looked at every single space, that we're doing. And you have to also remember that you have to take all those things out of the classrooms. There's a lot of pieces here as well. I mean, so you can't, like, for example, you can't leave 24 desks in a classroom, 12 come out. There's a lot of things that we're, moving and taking out. And so we've been trying to maximize the space so we can have every classroom is available. And then, even creating smaller spaces for teachers that are when they're delivering remote learning and things like that.
I just want to ask one question. It's kind of touched based on something that Betsy said about talking to students.
Do we see challenges with whatever the final?
I'm sorry. I'm not sure whose turn it is.
Brenda, why don't you go ahead and then we'll go back to David. David's froze on my screen right now.
Okay. So just to touch back on something that Betsy had said about how we have, she was talking with students who are in other districts and their parents work here. With the fact that all of our districts are so different, are we having a little compassion with our faculty for the fact that we may be going 4 days a week, but their own children may only be going a day or two a week? Like, how does that work? I don't want to lose our faculty because they have to be there for their own kids. I'm not sure how that's really working so well. I kind of wish that the governor would have given us some kind of model we could have all kind of followed that would work for all of our kids, but that would be in a perfect world. Does that make sense?
That sounds really good to me, Brenda, if we can make that happen. Yeah, I mean, obviously I know that Ms. Geithner has been working with staff members who have been having a lot of questions and things like that, and working through, individual types of things with her. And we were meeting with our attorneys today around just guidance and trying to understand all the dynamics that are out there that we're dealing with and all the different scenarios that are coming forward. I mean, we made the choice to have our staff here 5 days a week. That's the expectation. Obviously that's where we're at right now. And we felt that way for a variety of reasons. And so we recognize that. We keep our ear to the ground. We recognize that we have the most amazing staff in the region. And obviously we're trying to recognize all the issues and the challenges that they're bringing to the table. They're experiencing the same things. In every one of us is experiencing these things in this world that we live in a very personal way. And so we're trying to be as try to do something as possible. We're building a lot of planning, opportunities to work together, supports in place. At the same time, we have a job to do. So there's this huge balance of range that we have. And I want our staff and their families to be as successful and prosperous as all of our families. So.
But Brian, if staffing is part of the issue as well, that we said it's not necessarily space, but it's staffing. If we're able to, and I don't know if we are, but if we would be able to be more compassionate with our flexibility on our scheduling, and these teachers are parents and they work in other districts, and if we're able to allow them the ability to work from home or virtually on the days where they don't have to, would that help with staffing?
Actually, let me use a different word. We have a certain number of full-time equivalents, FTEs, in the bill, and it's not the flexibilities as much as it is with respect to what we're talking about, numbers, classrooms, model, right? The issue really is, let's say we have X amount of teachers that we have in our budget. We have X amount of teaching assistants, aides, custodians, every one of our bargaining units. We have X amount of each one of those. They add up to a specific number of full-time equivalents. And each year since I've been here, and it's what's happening across the region, is that, if you go back 7 years, we had almost 26,000 kids in this county. We are now below 20,000. When you have 20,000, you have less. And so each year we've been right sizing. So this past year in our budget, we reduced through retirements, resignations, and those types of things, 8.5 full-time equivalents. Were they all teacher positions? No, but a couple of those were, and those are were in the budget. So it's really full-time equivalents, Fallon. It's not the staffing. The staff, that's a part of it. That goes to the social emotional part, I think, as far as that. It's not that we don't have it. The model, the guidance requires that we have to split the classes certain ways for physical distancing. And then you couple that with the number of FTEs that we had in this budget this year. That's where you look at your matching of staffing, your ability to do a model, and we only have a certain number of classrooms that we have to spread the kids across.
Okay,
Is that
so
what you were asking though, Fallon? Weren't you
What
asking
I'm
something different?
yeah, so I guess a little bit of it. But what I'm saying also is on Brenda's point of what other districts are allowing in compassion. We have teachers who have children also at home that are online learning with their students as well. How are we dealing with their social emotional of allowing compassion to them, flexibility in their work schedule, so that they're able to we know we're in the middle of a pandemic and we know childcare is an issue everywhere. And so isn't it also up to us, like Brenda had said, about being a little bit more flexible than we have in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think as this evolves, we're going to learn a lot of different things, and we continue to work with the groups. I'm not going to lock in tonight and change that part of them. We need to have that conversation. We need to look at what this looks like in the end. We're still working through families that are making decisions or staff that are making decisions, around questions they have for Jerry, things like that are very specific to them around medical conditions and such. I think we are compassionate. We're all compassionate, or we wouldn't be in education. I think we're compassionate about kids and the work that we do. And I'm compassionate about I'm passionate, not compassionate, passionate about the fact that I want to make sure that our community is as safe as possible. And that's our staff and our students each and every day. At the same time, we're charged to make sure that we are reaching out to I'm sorry, Dave. I lost my thought.
I was just gonna. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I got disconnected. I did get back in, but on that note, I'm just wondering, with whatever plan is going forward, is it going to be impacted by staff that have underlying conditions that will not be able to teach in person? And while we're trying to accommodate them, what's going to be the impact on the model? Because we can't change those situations, but they will impact the model. Do we have a handle on that?
Yeah, I mean, Jerry, you want to comment? You can.
Yes, we asked our staff to let us know if they would perhaps have a circumstance that would prevent them from the work schedule that we have laid out, to let us know by August 10th. And we have heard from some staff members, and I am working with those staff members individually to review what their particular needs are and develop a plan to support them. At this time, with the requests that we have received, it should not impact our ability to provide the instructional models that we have proposed.
Thanks.
Okay, so I've been freezing up a little, but I don't know, maybe Dave asked this, I was freezing, but with our flexibility for if we had that for our staff, would they be able to maybe work from home on the day that we are not providing instruction if they had childcare issues?
At this point, the way we've designed the model, we would need to work through that. Right now, we have things planned on those Mondays. Those are opportunities to regroup for the week. It's opportunities to make sure that we're reaching out. One of the challenges this spring was all of the work, the reach out that we're trying to do to with our families and our kids. And one of the challenges was, and I would never ask our staff to do this, was using their own personal phones and things like that. I still have a parent who calls me from about 14 years ago because she still has the same number for me. And so I get it. That's something. So I think there are a lot of pieces that we're doing on those Mondays as far as the initial plan that we've developed as of August 11th.
Brian, what if something happens in the future, COVID numbers spike, and we have to shut down the school district? Would teachers and staff be required to still come in, or would we be going back to our spring model and they'd be able to work virtually?
We would be doing asynchronous and synchronous learning. I think what we would look at is we would work through that at that time. But obviously, depending on what those situations are, the decisions we make would be based on the guidance that we're getting at that point in time. But obviously, we would need to take all pieces in consideration. And if we don't need to travel, obviously that's something we would strongly consider.
Brian, one of the things that I've heard from parents, they want to have the opportunity to ask questions. And so can you offer a little bit of detail about that opportunity for them with the upcoming forums or presentations to them?
Yep. The forums at 3 and 6 this week, I'm actually leading them. That'll probably get another couple hundred people now. And because I wasn't available for the others. But there'll be the chat feature. And then if you can't tell, I enjoy talking. So I enjoy the back and forth. One of the challenges is if you get large groups, and online gets difficult after about an hour, hour and a half. But yes, the chat will be running, and what we've done, and Betsy can speak to them, but I've watched the chats on the side, and all the questions are coming. We record all those questions, and what we're going to start off with at 3 and 6 on Thursday will be those FAQ questions. A lot of those questions that we see that have been asked a number of times, those frequently asked questions. We'll start off with that. And then we will move from there into a part where we'll answer questions. Some I'll have answers for, I'm sure. Others I won't, and we will get answers to those just like we've been doing as part of our listening and learning. And we've been incorporating a lot of those thoughts in the work that we're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So obviously, I wish we were saying we're all ready to roll and everything, but again, thank you for this evening and providing the update and where we're at this point in time. But I do think we're doing the right thing. We're pulling the reins up a little bit and making sure we've got as accurate information as possible. So, but by Monday night, this will all be we'll have a plan no matter what, we're moving forward. If there's no other questions around that, the instructional calendar goes along with this. It's a nice segue. You've received that in your calendar. I don't know, Dave, I've got one. I can put it up. If you'd like me to put it up on the calendar, I can, or up on the screen. Alrighty, one second. What we're looking at, of course, my screen is now frozen for me, so I guess I can't do that. Huh. Okay, present now. 1 second, I'll put up what we're talking about is adjusting our, Can everybody see that? I can't see any of you now. So what we're talking about originally, our calendar would have had orientation day on the 2nd for all of our staff, and then students would have been engaging on the 8th. What we're doing now is we've taken the March Superintendent's Conference Day, which was originally right here on March 15th. And our second one, which I often keep, is right here on the 25th is where it would have been. So now what happens is we took those 2 days and we've moved them to the 8th and the 9th. The 10th will be a remote learning day for all students. And the idea behind that is it'll be a day where we're doing all of the orientation materials will be going out. And we'll do the same thing on Friday. A lot of those 2 days we'll be doing the orientations. If there's anything that we've learned, and we'll be working with our professional development committee and really putting that together. But if there's anything we learned from our extended school year was that the work that we had done on June 25th and the work that we did on July 6th with our staff, which was June 25th, we did all the safety stuff. And we were re-engaging our teachers and all of our support staff for the first time walking into a building and really learning all the different techniques of the mask wearing and the washing of desks and how we're taking temperatures and all the importance of routines and all of that. And then on the 6th, we brought the entire staff in, and some of that staff, majority of the staff stayed at Granby, and they actually went through a professional development session and worked together, and they looked at best practices and strategies in teaching in this type of new environment, and that was huge. And then they worked in their classrooms and got ready and that type of thing. And then what we did at the same time was the buses actually went to each of the homes and visited the families, which I've shared before, and we gave information. So that information, we could do the same through the remote type of approach. And part of the assurances requires that we do ongoing training for not only our staff, which will allow us to get them up to speed with all the new protocols and procedures and all the things we have to do related to the 78 assurances, but it also allows us the opportunity to work on making sure that they're prepared when we start reinforcing. One of the things we learned at ESY as well is at about 3 weeks in, the kids could teach the routines, and it was pretty amazing to watch. And so it just demonstrates the importance of the protocols, the procedures, and that emphasis on developing those relationships and getting ready to enter the new world. So our proposal is to move, we'll stay on the 2nd with the orientation day, and then Superintendent's Conference Day, Super Day, 2 remotes. Monday is a remote for us with live students or in person on the 15th. Also, if you really look at the data, and I'm surprised a little bit by the governor and his announcement, but if you look after Memorial Day and after July 4th, what did we have about a week later? We had an increase in the percentage of students in a percentage that we saw in the incidence of positive COVID. And so I think it also lends itself for an opportunity for that number to settle a little bit. And if you look at other districts across the region, you're seeing more and more of this. And I believe it's the right thing to do. It allows us to make sure that we ease in. It makes sure that we lay the groundwork for new practices and procedures. And it lays the groundwork and gives us the opportunity to make sure we settle in tightly as well.
You have me confused.
Of course I do. Sorry.
You really do.
I know.
When exactly is staff going to be here? I'm trying to write these things down.
I'm going to stop presenting so I can see everybody. All right. So staff will be in on September 2nd. Entire staff.
Okay. Now, will that be for training?
Not all together. Excuse me?
Will that be for training for them?
So the orientation, yeah, for the first 3 days, there'll be trainings, there'll be obviously planning, there'll be team meetings, there'll be, what do we call them, PLC meetings, there'll be focus on essential and non-essential standards. There'll be discussions, and Betsy chime in because I'm chattering again, asynchronous and synchronous learning. I mean, all of those types of things, just to lay groundwork that will continue to work throughout the year.
So that's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th for the teachers. Am I correct to assume?
It's the 2nd, 8, and 9.
Okay. I've had people asking me.
Oh, if I took it off the screen, if it has a color on it, we're in school. So the 2nd, so Wednesday, the staff would all be in. Okay. And no, I had a question actually yesterday. Would be meeting at GRB with 400 people? The answer is no. Everything is socially distanced. And we would be working on those things, obviously, in a much more creative way to manage those kinds of numbers. But the opportunity to come together safely and to start laying the groundwork. And I think also when you walk into a classroom, and if you haven't taken a look, thank you to Dom and all of our principals. If you go to our website, you can actually see exemplars of what a elementary classroom looks like, a middle school classroom, junior high, as well as a high school classroom. It's really neat. It's one of those panoramics. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty great. But it looks very different. You walk in, and that was the first thing that a number of our teachers in our ESY said, wow, I don't know if I can do this. It doesn't look the same. And now you talk to them, they look at it as, you know what, we can do this. So it's very different when you walk in. It's a rather unsettling at times when you don't see it looking the way it's always looked for you.
So the kids are going to start what date?
The kids would actually, no, the kids would start virtually 8, 9, 10 and 11 and 14, because 14 is our virtual day. So the first day that students would be in person would be on Tuesday, the 15th.
15th.
Brian, with the move of the superintendency from the spring to the fall to opening, that's usually kind of a buffer for us if we exceed our snow days. So with the possibility that we wind up maybe someday going back, to a normal or typical schedule, if that were to happen in the school year, are we kind of like, is it compromising the ability for you to make any adjustment later on by making that?
I don't think so. I mean, we're moving, and we could have put them anywhere we've always wanted. We've always kept one in our pocket, the March one, and we've adjusted the March one before. I think we have the February one that's a countywide. I think that one's one that we have in the pocket. In the last couple of years, if you follow, I was talking to our meteorologist last winter, and he said to me, track when you've done your snow days each year. And ironically, they're almost on the same days year to year, which is very interesting. I never really tracked that. And so in the past couple of years, we've had a bad weather day mid to late November. We've had one toward the beginning of December, and then nothing, and then January. So I think what we do is, I think we would monitor that very closely. And then obviously in the calendars, there's that provision because they are superintendent's conference days. We could have used, we would have to look at our calendar and follow it for using around breaks, things like that, or at the end of the year. So we only really had one in the pocket, if you will. We still have 5 snow days available built in as well.
Well, it's not going to snow this year, so we're okay there.
I will duly note that on August 11th, and I hope you are absolutely correct. All right. So that's on your, I believe in your resolutions this evening, it should be. The District Comprehensive Improvement Plan. Dan and Betsy?
Well, actually, I'm turning this one totally over to Dan because he will own the implementation of this plan. And it was written with a team, though. I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. This was written with input from our DCC committee. And with that, Mr. Carroll is going to take it away.
Mrs. Connors will all own this implementation. All means all. Hi,
Good
everyone.
point, Mr. Carroll.
Let's present. And I will promise to be complete but succinct with this presentation. Let's see. All right. Well, I know that the plan that really is occupying all of our thinking now is our reopening plan. With that said, our district, as it has for the past several years, still has a responsibility to develop and implement what's called a District Comprehensive Improvement Plan, or a DCIP. So this plan is a function of Essa Accountability. And again, Essa stands for the Every Student Succeeds Act. This is the federal accountability legislation that all Title I districts are required to meet. We've done some presentations in the past where we've introduced the 7 areas of Essa accountability. Essentially, in each of these areas, academic achievement, student growth, academic progress, graduation rates, English language proficiency, chronic absenteeism. You could think of a giant data blender that the state takes the key data indicators for each of these areas, makes a giant list of districts from lowest ranking to highest in each of these categories, does this for all students, and then also does this for each subgroup of students within that district and for each school. So they come up with all of these lists for each of these categories. And at the end of that, what was determined for our 2019-20 status is that all of our buildings are in good standing. So that's great news. At the same time, and this is a confusing kind of contradiction, our district is still identified as a target district. So that designation as a target district leads us to having to complete this plan. So again, just a quick little review of how we get that target district status. This is now year 3 of Essa Accountability. And the original Essa designations were formed based on the system that preceded Essa. So this was still Race to the Top and the kind of embers of No Child Left Behind. If a district had been identified under that previous system, as we were what's called a focus district. And under the new system, had just one subgroup who kind of appeared in the danger zone, then a district in that situation would be designated as a target district. So that's us. We fall into kind of a small corner of the accountability rules. And that requires us to yearly complete our plan. Also should be noted, this is based now on data that's 2 years old, okay? This is from the 2018-19 school year. That's the last year, of course, when we had state tests or regents exams. So when we're talking about accountability designations, we are planning based on data situation that's a couple years old at that time. But this is why our district, our community, saw fit to get ahead of this kind of a cycle, this cycle of 1-year plans, and plan more strategically. This was the rationale behind developing our 5-year strategic coherence plan. And when we did that, we did it in alignment with the types of categories that DSIP requests, so that we could really stretch our goals out over 5 years. Essentially with the concept that a DSIP plan each year would kind of write itself as being the action steps from 1 year to the next of our strategic coherence plan. And that's the case for this DSIP. So our DSIP priority 1 becomes literacy. This is going to look very familiar from now on, based on our strategic coherence plan. So,
excuse me, Mr. Carroll, your
yes.
slides are not matching what you're talking about. I'm not sure.
We don't see literacy right now?
No, we
Do we
don't.
not? Oh, you don't see the presentation. You just see the...
We just see the cover page of the presentation. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. All right, let's see.
Perfect.
I can't tell what you see.
We see the slide. We can see this. We don't see the slideshow format, but we see that one slide that says literacy, so we can at least see it. There you go. Oh.
All right.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, so we know in the literacy area, this is where we really form the basis for our efforts in the Oswego County Literacy Initiative. This is where we as a district, in partnership with the county, are focused on getting almost all of our students reading on grade level by the end of grade 3. So to get there over 5 years, we have incremental growth goals, so that we can see our kindergartners, our first graders, our second graders progressively reaching towards ending their 3rd grade year as grade level readers. This year, you can see, if you can see the presentation now, we're leaving that specific goal as a blank until we're able to complete our fall screening, okay? Now, typically, we have a very good sense from our data in June of where we can expect our students to be come spring or come fall, okay? This year, because of the school closure, we don't have assessment data for our students from, reaching as far back before March. So we do have that. We have an indication of the gains kids made up until March. What we don't have a great handle on is the impact of the school closure and the really extended absence from school. We know that every year we can anticipate, in a normal year, we can anticipate a degree of summer slide, right? Or when students typically return to school having lost a bit of their gains from the previous year. We just don't know what impact that's going to be going into September. So we will assess our students at the beginning of the year, and we'll use that for the baseline, and we can provide an update on specific goals.
Do we have an idea for how we will get that data from the students who are not attending physically and will be learning from home? Will they not be screened, or will we only be screening those physically present?
That's a great question, and we hope they will be. So DIBELS is our early literacy screening tool, okay? That's our K through 3 main reading test. In the spring of last year, the creators of Dibbles, Dibbles comes from the University of Oregon, advised do not attempt online at-home assessing with Dibbles. The results will be invalid. At the same time, they have pledged to work hard to come up with some type of solution for fall. Okay, so we hope that they can. Of course, that would be a huge hole if we didn't have those at-home students.
Might we use something else other than Dibbles? Has there been conversation about that, or?
We would end up having to use something else, at least, for our, to get some sense of, students' diagnostics, where they are when they come to us. Our preference by a long shot would be Dibbles. That helps us stay consistent with our long-term data monitoring. It helps us stay on track with our county. Dibbles is the assessment tool that the county is using to help measure the Oswego County Literacy Initiative. Okay, so it helps us to see our progress in a long-term way, and it's very much aligned to our early literacy curriculum. So the information that comes out of Dibbles directly informs the instruction that students receive. So by far, that's the preference.
But if we're not able to use it, I know that's a preference, but if we're not, because our Coherence plan says that the students will be reading at or above the grade level. So is STAR an option if it's not? So we're able to collect
it. Could be.
I mean, you said yourself the data is back from 2018 to 2019, and if we're running on no data, I mean, some type of testing has to be better than nothing at all.
Absolutely. So STAR and Dibbles are all what's called norm referenced assessments, right? So what that means is that all of the data that's all the statistics that come from those assessments are based on administering that test in exactly the same way over millions of administrations. So they're not those types of assessment companies are not confident giving those same kinds of assurances about percentile rank or comparing student scores or knowing exactly what is an accurate benchmark if it's not administered in the school setting where it usually is. Like I said, they have their research teams working on this, so we hope to hear some kind of update. But
and do we have not a drop dead date, but do we have a plan on when we would have that information, whether we're going Dibbles or?
Our CKLA program has diagnostic assessments built into it. Those are not norm referenced. Those can be administered as part of the curriculum that will still be delivered. So
and so do
that's
many of our
really
other textbook series as well.
Yeah.
So, not that we want to rely on those as 100%. Again, as Dan is saying, we're taking guidance from the test makers themselves
Right.
as to what is the right way to create the testing. Dave, I think one of the things you're getting at is we are probably not going to be able to compare apples to apples from a global 3,000-foot plan implementation level. What we can tell you is we will figure out a way to get to individual student data to make sure that we know we can document how students are growing. But those are two different things. But I am as you know, I am just very concerned right now that there is no way for us to compare apples and apples and create a testing environment that would provide for that.
Exactly.
I'm just thinking we really need to, separate from this conversation, assess the impact of the closure on all
Amen.
students. And I don't think we can do that unless we assess all of them.
No question.
Correct.
All will be assessed. There's no question about that.
I also think an important conversation needs to be had with staffing, as we put so much pressure on these STAR tests, these double tests and things like that for staffing to show growth. And if we're not testing and we're focusing on, SEL and things like that, then we can't be holding our staff accountable for making sure that they're showing this growth when we can't even test for it. We can't even test for regression. So we have
Dibbles isn't associated at all with any kind of teacher accountability.
Dibbles or anything, but
or STAR. None of those diagnostics are.
Saying is that teachers are going to need that extra support in the classroom because we focus so much on them making sure that student is showing growth throughout that classroom. But we're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, that that's not going to be our primary focus. So we also need to make sure that we're not increasing staff anxiety because we're expecting them to hit a certain rate or a certain level.
Correct. And let me go back, Fallon, to reassure you of that. Let's remember, what have we been told from the Commissioner of Education that we're going to focus on? First is health and safety. Second is SEL. And then we will get to academics. We will get there. We will. But it's going to take us a little longer.
Thank you, Betsy. I just wanted for you to say it loud so people in the back could hear us.
I screamed it.
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Carroll.
No, but I mean, with that, the DSIP is really kind of doubling down on the strategic coherence plan. With the DSIP is our way of saying this is still center place on the table. That despite the challenges, getting our students to a place of reading on grade level is still a priority. And it's still very much an important piece of their overall social, emotional, developmental health. And the next priority area is instruction. So you're going to notice a pattern here. These all look familiar. These are all straight out of our strategic coherence plan. What we heard loud and clear as we surveyed the community in relation to the spring remote learning experience was that we needed more engaging, more collaborative experiences. Well, that sounds really familiar. That sounds exactly like our instructional priorities and our goals within our strategic coherence plan. So if you remember, our instructional goal is really based on student survey results. We are striving to see increases in the responses of our students who say that their classes are interesting and keep their attention. We need a remote and hybrid environment to be interesting and keep our students' attention. We also want to see increases in our students who respond that they work with partners or in groups. And this really reminds me of the phrase that Mrs. Geithner keeps reminding us of: not socially distanced, physical distance. Okay. So here's an example of where we're together in this environment and we're collaborating, we're working together. We need to make sure that we have these opportunities for kids if we're not physically close together in class. And finally, we need to make sure that whatever we offer in every environment, if it's online, if it's in person, reaches students where they are, so that we'll see students responding more, that their teachers explain things in different ways so that all students can learn. When we looked at these and really considered, I should say, one reason that we did request an extension on submitting the DSIP, we took a month extension because we wanted to make sure that our strategic coherence plan, a DSIP that reflects that, would be coherent with a return to school plan. When we look at this area in particular, we realize that it's more important than ever, that we really do need to make sure, work hard, professionally develop, to make sure that our online or hybrid instruction reflects those instructional priorities that we want to see in the classroom. Same in the social emotional developmental health area. Our long-term priority is for all students to feel welcome in their school environment. This challenge gets harder when we're physically distant. Again, we need to be physically distant, not socially distant. We need to make sure that we are maintaining senses of community and connectedness, even if students are connecting over a screen.
With this particular priority, and the conversation that we had earlier about, the hybrid model, how are we going to address this priority with the students who are not physically in school?
Jerry, do you want to speak more directly to that one?
Sure. Because of the priorities laid out in the plan, social emotional well-being being one of those top 3 priorities, we will continue to have SEL as part of our instruction regardless of the environment where students are learning, whether that's entirely remote or a hybrid model where they are in person for part of the time. And those activities or learning opportunities will be around those New York State social emotional learning benchmarks, which are actually skills for life readiness, and we'll continue to keep that as part of our focus.
And how are those integrated, Jerry, and so that all students have some experience with them?
Mm-hmm. So we use a curriculum in K through 6 called Second Step, actually pre-K through 6 called Second Step, and that is aligned with the New York State benchmarks. And we also then embed those opportunities in things like guided study hall and win time for our secondary students.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. In the family engagement area, some of our action steps for this year, for the coming school year with the strategic coherence plan, involve creating a common format or template for communicating with families and students, specific course and curricular details. So specifically, being very clear what the learning outcomes are for each course, so that when whether your child enters global history as a 9th grader or 5th grade math, that we would all be crystal clear about what the specific learning outcomes for that student are over the course of the year. Okay. So we will work with the Family Engagement Task Force. This will be one of our first tasks within that task force for the year, to bring families and teachers and students also together to develop what that kind of a template will look like. Okay. Our hope also is that we'll see those learning outcomes right there in our students' Google Classrooms, so that they are present, clear as day, for families and students with all the work they're doing. And finally, in the innovation area, this is the area where we really look at that growth mindset and forging ahead and evolving, but it's also where we look at developing more efficiencies within the organization. So those things come together, that concept of evolving with technology and also becoming more efficient in this goal. The goal here is to actually reduce the total inventory of learning applications by getting rid of redundant ones. Okay, what ends up happening when you have redundant tools to do the same things is we add to some confusion where we have many different teachers using many different tools, and this becomes confusing for students, becomes confusing for families. So the objective here, and Mr. Lisi, feel free to pipe in, is that the tech committee and the tech department would look closely at what's the best of the best. Let's focus on really professionally developing and promoting use of the best tools for assessment, for example, for interactive class discussions, and let's move out the others because we don't need them and it's inefficient. Mr. Lisi, would you add anything to that?
No, I think that's a great summary, Dan.
Thank you. All right, and that's what we have. That's the high-level view of our DSIP plan and the strategy behind it. Again, really, let's double down on our strategic coherence plan and keep it at the forefront.
Dan, is there any collaboration done since this is a county initiative, the literacy initiative, to know what other districts, how they're prioritizing or approaching, assessing?
Yes.
Are we pretty consistent with what they're doing? Are they?
Yeah, I can say that we're very tight in our communication around the OCLI, the literacy initiative. It's a regular agenda item at our county instructional committee meetings, okay, which are represented by every district in the county. The major discussions this year, going into what we know is going to be an unusual year, involve ensuring that high quality PD is still available to all our teachers, even if districts have to modify their calendars and we get out of alignment with countywide superintendent's days. So the planning is on now for what was planned to be a November and a February superintendent's conference day. Those are all, the Reading League is already developing those as full day virtual sessions. And what they found is they're able to attract national level speakers to be part of it because now it's moved to this online model. The assessment question, assessment discussion that we just had here is very much alive in CIC, okay? I can say that within that group, we've discussed the same challenges related to DIBELS. Everyone is still committed to doing their best to use it. As a group, we had that discussion about holding off from typically we'll assess within the first 2 weeks, but holding off towards the end of September to let kids reacclimate to school. So those are all really consistent countywide. And I can say that the commitment is absolutely still there. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Dan. Alrighty. As you can see, it's very tied back to our strategic coherence plan. One of the things was oftentimes districts end up with separate documents, separate goals, separate plans. So what we've done is our plan always comes back to our center line. So anything the state always asks or is looking for, we were able to bring it back to our strategic coherence plan. So another area where it seems to be providing the center board that we need. So thank you. The next piece that we have.
Can I just interrupt briefly? I'm sorry, I was looking at the strategic coherence plan when we were going through it. This DSET plan is fine, but do you feel like, maybe I just feel that this is kind of trying to achieve some low-hanging fruit. Like our coherence plan says when we talk about instruction that we want 80% of the kids by 2024 ready for class, interested in wanting to keep my attention. But this plan only requires 38%.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So those goals are scaled back to be incremental over 5 years.
So will
Okay,
we still be able to reach that 80% by 2024?
Hope so.
That's our plan.
And then even like I was looking at the innovation, which again is a fine plan, but it's I couldn't find where it paired up exactly with section 6.1, 6.2, or 6.3 of the coherence plan. I mean, it could tie in a little bit, but shouldn't we be directly trying to reach those goals that are set up in the strategic coherence plan?
So let's see. So this.
I mean, I know we're limited with COVID and the things that we can do.
And that is part of it. It is.
We won't meet our goal and our plan.
So we set us up. Maybe it's that. Is it maybe that we set ourselves up for failure if we set the bar too high in the DSIP? Would that be an accurate statement?
I don't know I think part of it is in the COVID-19, you're allowed to, one of the things the state really stressed, and Dan and I both have piles like this from the state. They're really looking at in COVID-19 issues for this year coming up, what can we truly accomplish? So I think, Fallon, it's not that we're trying to get off kilter. We're actually trying to forge ahead and keep us on track. When many people are just saying, let it fall beside, we're not willing to do that. We're keeping it going. But yes, right now, incrementally, we have to pause a minute to get us keep working on the same thing. I mean, we've been all over tonight from the time we talked about opening to the time we got to DSIP. We're like, woohoo, all over the place. So credit to Dan and the DCC for recognizing that we're all over the place and we need to streamline it back to our strategic coherence plan and our mission and our vision. So I hear what you're saying, Fallon, as you're reading through that, it's a little frustrating. You're thinking, oh my gosh, how do we get to this bigger goal of that strategic coherence plan? But I think for this year, we do have to be a little bit careful. And I think we need something to be able to celebrate at the end of the year when we are able to keep forging through, not knowing what the next 6 months is going to hold.
It's also very comparable to what we mean when we talk about essential standards in our course areas. You know, in a typical year, we might have a set of standards for a course that's literally 100 specific standards. What we really are encouraged by the state and are encouraging our PLCs to dig into is taking your set of standards, viewing it within the realities of what we can anticipate for this year, and really zeroing in on what are the most essential learnings that we can't afford for a student to leave that course without. So that's really kind of the mindset and the approach to identifying which pieces of the strategic coherence plan make sense for this year's environment. Okay.
And we've had to come back and ask ourselves those 4 basic questions. In COVID-19, what is it we want our students to know? Back to Dave, your comment, how will we know that they know it? What will we do when they haven't? And what will we do when they've already learned it? And that's kind of like Dan said, that's what we've come back to as our focus.
And that is consistent with the Strategic Coherence Committee's work from the onset. The committee said this was a living document and that we would adjust when and where we must. And no one absolutely foresaw COVID-19, but we did understand as a committee, because we have some very lofty goals, that we may have to pause and make adjustments along the way to get us to our final goals. So we are consistent with our original intent, even though we've backed off for this year. We have not backed off on the final outcome at this point. So I think that's a good thing that we're still looking for that final outcome. I don't know what it means for everyone in the work that they have to look forward to after this year. But for the moment, so that we don't make everyone crazy, I think it makes sense to make an adjustment, as we said we would, based on circumstances as they arose. If I captured that, we had a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah, nicely done.
I certainly don't mind, making adjustments. My fear is we get through this year and then we expect a ridiculous level of on our staff and on our facilitators and on our coaches and everything else of, okay, well, now you're expected to hit, this year it was only 38%, but now it's 2022 and you've got to hit 79%.
And Valen, I think, under, again, Dan's leadership, he has said to us, the state is pushing out things like state testing. The state is pushing out the next gen roll-in of standards. And Dan has said we need to push out by 1 year our strategic coherence plan expectations too. And I think that's where we give ourselves that time to get there. I really do.
Okay.
I have faith that we will get there.
So well said. I have faith as well. I think our plan is the right plan. And that's where, you think back to the plan that we talked about, the reopening, it comes back to the strategic coherence plan. The linchpin of that whole thing, the literacy is right up front. Number one is K-3 literacy. It's the very first thing in our plan after the vision and mission. And that's why, because if we can't get them reading and get their math skills as high as we can get them, then that sets them up either for success throughout not only K-12, but success well beyond. And so that's where we need to get to. And I believe the plan, everything we've been talking about, does come back to that. So that more global level. So, all right, the capital improvement project, I will be brief. We did discuss on at our last board meeting. We came back on August 5th. If you remember, the bids came in and they were about $1.5 million above. And so what we did was we came together on August 5th at the request of the board. Robin and Nick presented and represented extremely well. We were with King and LaChase. We've provided that information in your daily updates. We reevaluated the scope and the sequence of the work. You asked us to come back with a recommendation of the priorities of the priorities. And with that, the recommendation was to award the contract to the lowest responsible bidders, which was for the site work. And that'll be the site work at Lanigan as well as at the junior high and at Volney. And then we're going to reject all the bids with respect to the general work, the HVAC, the electrical, and the plumbing. And so that leads to the construction cost of $3.1 million for that work. That allows, and then we're also going to be rebidding and looking at some different projects, working on doors, things like that. We'll be getting those project recommendations and those out to bid in the coming weeks. Is that a good capture, Ms. Griffin and Mr. DiGiolone, of our meetings?
Go ahead, Nick. You can go first.
No, I think that covers just about the gist of it.
Yeah. And the idea was really making sure that with COVID, it's driven prices up, and it's also it's cut supply lines and all sorts of different impacts. And this board, I think, has acted responsibly, having us go back and reprioritize. When all of those priorities were set up, they were over 1.5 years ago. So you really come into this, it's been a while. And so now when they came in the bid, obviously the prices, things are different. And I think the board did a good thing by really challenging the team and really saying, what are the priorities right now? And there could be other regulations and things that come at us that we need to adjust with respects to, air systems or other kinds of things that maybe evolve out of COVID and other expectations from the state.
I would say that I felt that King and LaChase gave it, we had with all of us, Brian and Nick and I, we had a very spirited conversation about where the board wanted to go. They really wanted to understand our reprioritized idea. They asked a lot of questions. They pushed back a little bit, and then we pushed back a little bit. And I believe now we were crystal clear when we left. I felt very confident when we left that they understood what the board's expectations were. And Nick and I really drove home the point that safety was our number one concern still. Although we can't afford to do everything that we want, the board honed in on key aspects of safety related to how people get in and out, access our buildings and our students for the greatest safety. And that's where we're going with this. Anything else, Nick?
No, it was vehicle safety first and foremost. as well as I thought it was a good compromise on working on some of the doors. It was a compromise to actually reorganizing offices and putting in windows and so forth, which we could do at a later date. Also, if I'm not mistaken, in the next phase, we're going to be looking at those other areas that we elected to wait on, like the electrical, the plumbing, and so forth, and then reset our priorities as well.
That's correct. Isn't it great when the superintendent doesn't have to do all the talking? We need
Infrastructure. That's the word. We did the safety, and then we focused on the most important pieces of infrastructure that we don't believe can be allowed to let go because it would cost the district more money over the long haul.
Yeah, and it allows us to regroup, and what we didn't want to do was lose things in the phase 2 schools as well. So it's really regrouping and looking at that whole scope of work and reprioritizing to make sure that we get the best value for the dollars that we have available to us at this point in time. So it was great work. It was really a great meeting that we had. So it's a good call by the board. Thank you. I failed to number 1 and 2, just the school readiness. Those are more announcements at the very beginning of my section. Just that, we do our annual readiness walkthroughs. We would do those physically distanced, and we would do those on September 1st at Volney Lanigan GRB starting at 5, and then on September 2nd, junior high, Granby, Fairgrave, and then Erie Street. I added Erie Street. Last year we did the Ed Center. We could do both, or we could swap those out. That's at the pleasure of the board. But we could work on, and so that's when those are scheduled. We would work, obviously, wear masks, and we keep them as limited as possible. So it would probably be Dom and Al and the head custodian, along with board members and myself. Very traditional of what we've done, but I think it'd be interesting and good for you to see what the work that we've been doing. We'll obviously take lots of photographs and things like that as well, as we always do. And finally, if there are no questions on capital or on readiness, the school resource officer. On July 17th, I received a phone call indicating from the city of Fulton that they wanted to, they still support the SRO program, but with not using a city of Fulton police officer. And again, they made that decision. We asked for that in writing. We received that on August 4th. And Ms. Griffin, being the partner that she is, when we look at some of these as president of the board, we had conversation. There's a very specific process that you have to go through, and there are options such as going with another law enforcement agency. There's looking at private vendors, individual vendors, and then obviously looking at something really out of the box, which could be not to go that direction at all. Obviously that's the fourth, but there are different pieces there. So there's a process that we need to go through to do that work. It's been a fantastic process and relationship with the Fulton Police. I've only been here for 4 years, but it's truly a strong, wonderful partnership. And it's truly a key point or key position that we have in our community. But we're going to need to reassess as part of that. What do we need in 2021 in this world? So Robin, if there's anything to add to that, next steps would really be following that process and working through that.
I would just say that we're in a different than we were the first time we hired a resource officer. We didn't have a lot of options then. There are more options now. So that's always makes things a little more interesting when you have choices. But we do need the community input, the stakeholder input. It's pretty broad-based that we're required to do. And we will do that. Brian, I don't know. We don't have a timeline. There's a lot going on. We will get to it. But I think we've got to take care of the immediate focus groups and things first, and we have to find people that want to serve. We will do that, and we will get this moving and do it as timely as possible without rushing. We don't want to make mistakes. We want to get it right, and like I said, it's different. It's a different process than the first time. So I'm anticipating that we'll have a lot of help from our administrative staff as we figure out next steps and proceed forward.
Can you
Yeah.
share why the Fulton Police Department chose to, end the relationship, if you will, or the opportunity to have an SRO in our buildings?
I don't know really. Other than they felt that they. I don't know the exact wording. It was they felt that we would be better going to another agency. But it's not that simple for us because we do have a process. The law changed. There were some requirements that changed in 2018.
Yep.
So
I'm just wondering if there's anything that we could have done differently, or, I think the value in having, obviously, as we know, community presence, someone who knows the community, connected to our youth, to go outside, it just seems disconnected to me. And I'm just wondering if there is, if there's something we can learn from whatever that decision was about. If it's something we control, they control. It seems like we're providing an opportunity for them to pay for a portion of one of their officers' salaries, which, in this day and age, whenever we share services or share, it's helpful to all agencies. So I'm just trying to understand what that is about.
David, I was only offered an opportunity and I shared that email with you. It was after the decision was made to meet with a very specific plan that they thought would be good for us. But again, it doesn't work out for us because we have some other steps we have to do. And that's all I know. I don't know any more than that. Brian, I would have to refer to Brian. I don't
think there was anything in the partnerships. I think that they're looking at all of their restructuring. They're looking at their budgets, and obviously, just like we are challenged to provide or find professional staff in some areas, certifications, for example. It's hard to get certain areas. Math teachers or special education teachers, secondary. There's one that's in my old wheelhouse. There are not that many out there. And same thing happens, I think, in the world of law enforcement. And the way that dynamic had been set up, they have 34 officers, but one of those officers was ours. And they made that decision that they needed to have that. Again, their decisions on we had no issues with the service and the supports that we were getting here in Fulton in the schools.
Do they support 4th Street and not the same officer, a different officer?
They've also pulled their officer out of, I checked with the district superintendent, that also has been removed from that program.
Because that was with City. So
that was City's program. That's correct.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
And I guess my question is, and I don't even know if there's an answer to it, is, with the city and the police force, they're having such a big push on community policing and how important that is getting those officers involved with the community. And this officer was heavily involved now with our students and coaching in different programs, and he was at every football game. And so I guess I'm kind of shocked that, given the fact that they're saying that community policing is such a big push and that's what they want to do, is have those police officers make that connection, then they end with use of a very fine officer who not only he was on safety committee and other committees in the district and was able to provide that insight that we wouldn't know otherwise. So
and again, I can only say that I shared all the communications that we received, either Brian and myself combined. That was all shared. It wasn't a lot. I think it was a couple of emails, and Brian had 1 or 2 casual passing conversation. Nothing, there was no deep dialogue. There was no, to my knowledge, any deep conversation in advance about there being issues. I won't say that there are or aren't. And I do know that they have their own set of issues outside of all of that. And I really don't have anything I can speak to. I'm sorry I don't have more information, but that's just how it that's how it transpired and rolled out to us. And we'll deal with it. We'll be okay.
And I think it's probably good that, in a way, for us, it's sort of telling that the arrangement with 4th Street and City BOCES as well, then it was a consistent decision. It wasn't, just directed perhaps or related to their relationship with us. So
that's right.
And just in transparency, I just so staff and students and everybody knows, So the city is not interested in continuing any until we can fill the position. We will no longer have an SRO at that site until we're able to go through our community process and everything, correct? There'll be no SRO.
At this point in time, we don't have that position, but we can look at alternatives at this point in time. I think the other piece is they made a recommendation. The recommendation was very similar to the rest of some of the other districts in the county who are with the sheriffs. If you follow the news, you'll see that the sheriff started a program about a year ago under our new sheriff, and some districts are doing that, and that's fine. And I believe that was something that they wanted us to look at. However, Robin is very accurate. There is a process required by New York State law. It's not something that we have to do that. I don't know what city has done. I have heard they possibly have gone with the sheriffs. I have not had that conversation in depth. And again, that's not my program. And so we're looking at all of the options that we have to go through to make sure we do what's right for Fulton. That may be the choice in the end. I don't know. But I think we have to go through the process as Ms. Griffin was indicating. We can share that. There's a PowerPoint that actually does a quite nice job that Ms. Griffin found around this topic that actually laid it out quite nicely with the options that we need to look at. And that's really part of it, really, I believe, spun out of the Project Save legislations, where the changes around SROs really and the processes around that. And again, we haven't gone through this for I don't know how many years, probably 20, I would be my guess, since the SROs have been here. So it was not our decision. It's a fantastic relationship. They're very supportive of us. I think they would support us using another agency, but we want to explore all opportunities.
And we have a certain guideline, correct? Like, don't we have to have a committee with like the fire chief and the police chief? There's certain members, correct?
It's defined in the guidance. It's defined in what you have to do. Yes.
Everything's laid out for us, and we will follow that. Basically, the safety committee, that structure, and then some additional folks to be invited to the table that we don't have. And students also are to be part of it. It's very specific to have students part of the committee. So we will do that. And remember, we also, if it's in keeping with our strategic coherence plan, again, that the whole committee structure fits with what we said we would do with communication and how we would work now and in the future with our stakeholders. So it'll all work out. It's just unfortunate that we didn't have more advanced notice where we could have maybe worked on it before it came to an end. But things are what they are, and we will get through this.
I mean, if we don't have this SRO plan in place by the opening of the first day of school, I mean, we are still covered by the services of the Fulton City Police Department. Mm-hmm. Should we have any kind of issues in any of our buildings. So I don't feel it's something we should be rushing. I feel like the reopening plan is obviously our forefront, more important stuff right now, but it is important to definitely get this committee going. We are covered should we not, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they would have to respond if we had mental health transports, if we needed support at a school, any of those things they were required. They have to do that. That's part of the service that comes with their role.
And again, you're right, Brenda. At 911, you dial 911. They determine who they send, and they will send someone, and we will go from there. So I have faith that our staff will formulate relationships with those folks if they don't have them already. And again, we'll get there. I think we'll be okay. It's just not going to be business as usual for a little while.
I just think it's important to put out there that if we don't have someone in there, that our parents and our students and our faculty feel safe knowing that we are still going to be protected by our police department. They're just not going to be in our building at this particular moment. So I don't want them to have that to worry about on top of all of the reopening and everything else that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah. It's definitely still a priority. It's a priority of the priorities. I mean, it's definitely something we need to get dealt with in an expedited fashion. It can't sit around too long. I want to make sure that we address this because obviously we wouldn't have had it if we didn't believe. Obviously, we need to look at the role and the responsibilities. But there's a great point, Ms. Abelgore. Absolutely true as well. And I believe that's the conclusion of the superintendent's report. Thank you.
Would someone move item 4.01, please?
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? And Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Very good. Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Elmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
I'm a yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. DeJolorn?
Yes.
Okay, 4.02, please.
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Elmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. DeJolorn?
Yes.
If you're so willing, I would suggest we could batch 5.01 through 5.03.
Yes.
Yes.
Would someone move that? Move it.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Okay. Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Elmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. DeJolorn?
Yes.
I would like to recommend batching item 6.01 through item 6.08.
Yes.
Move it.
Second.
Second.
I don't mind matching it, but I do have a question on one. So
Yeah, that's good.
should I
Yep.
should I ask that now?
Was it moved?
I don't know.
Seconded. Yeah, it was.
I said move it.
Seconded? Okay, then go ahead. Okay, Mrs. Perry.
Sorry, can we just go back to the move and the second?
I moved it.
Thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. Mrs. Abelgore, to you.
Okay, so my one question is I see that we have a resignation in our music department, and since we have had the big discussions about our music department earlier in the budget season, my concern is are we going to be replacing this particular music position, or is it something that you are thinking of not replacing?
So we're going to post. We'll post for it, and obviously we look at our enrollments and all those pieces. So right now, that's what we're doing. We're posting, and then we'll move forward.
So you're
As far as we need to look at all of our enrollments and all of our classes, like we do at everything else. Right now, we're posting for the position.
So you're planning to fill it.
That's the plan at this point in time. Again, with all the numbers coming in and things like that, obviously. But right now, that is the plan.
And if you decide that you're not posting, is this something you will let us know?
Obviously.
Well, I'm
For
just
sure.
saying because
Absolutely would do that.
we
Yes,
talk
Ms.
so
Davenport.
much about how we don't want to see any more cuts from
Absolutely.
there. So,
That's correct.
okay.
Duly noted. And yes, we would have that conversation well before we would. Yes, we would. You would be well aware if we were going to make that type of recommendation.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Very good. Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Abelgore?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. DeJolorn?
Yes.
All right, brings us to board forum. Nick, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I just want to thank the board for trusting in Robin and I to represent you at that meeting with the contractors. Thank you. I hope we did you well.
Mrs. Cooper.
Oh, can you come back to me?
Okay, Mrs. Lyons.
I want to thank Mr. Lisi for his technology meeting today. It enlightened me, and I'll be pleased to be on it. I was quite impressed.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Abelgore.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lisi, did I miss a meeting today? It's very possible. I am so sorry.
You may have. That's okay.
Oh, I didn't. Okay. I got to get that schedule again, Mrs. Perry, because I must have been on summer mode today. I want to thank you guys so much, to all the administrators, for all of your hard work. I know this is not easy for you guys. And I want to thank you so much for taking all of our questions. I feel like we might have bombarded you guys again this evening, but it's really important for us to get it out there for the community so that they do know that you are taking their voices and you are taking things from the survey to heart when you're making your decisions. So I do appreciate that. I just wanted to applaud you guys for that. I also, on that note, I just have this pull for being really flexible and passionate for not only our parents, but for the faculty as well, because I feel if we don't have their social emotional wellness taken care of, they're not going to be able to be there 100% for our kids. And we know that with last spring, we went through all of the unknowns. Even though you guys have worked so hard, there are still so many unknowns out there. So thank you also for looking into that as well for them. I am truly saddened with the mayor's decision for ending our partnership with the SRO, but I know that by putting the community group together, we'll do what's best for the safety of our students and our staff. So just want to thank you guys all for that. And to Nick and Robin for doing the capital improvement project. Thank you for being our voice.
Dave.
Thank you. And I want to just ditto what Brenda said, but also just to add that, a lot of the communication, at least that I've received, I know parents have questions, and rightfully so, and I know administration is doing the best they can to get a plan together and to anticipate all the questions that parents have. But I know that, parents really just want to have the opportunity to ask questions and, to receive answers and information so they can make the best decision for their students is what I'm hearing. They want to make the best decision possible for their students. So I know we're all working together in this. And as Brenda said, we offered a lot of questions tonight, like we did last time. And I appreciate you responding to all of those as best you could. Thank you.
Mr. Crandall.
Here. I just want to thank everyone for their presentations. Good job. Bessie, get well. When someone says break a leg, that means you don't have to go out and do it. You're just trying to speed up your retirement. And get well. And that's it.
Mrs. Cooper.
Okay, so back to me.
Yeah.
So a couple questions I jotted down during our session. When we're talking about doing the surveys, I know, and I'm going to say that I'm one of those. I know that a lot of times those surveys get lost. Do we know how many emails are either not delivered or not answered? And if we do, how are we reaching out to those families to either update their information or get those results?
That's a great question. I can take that one. So we do get a response report that gives us a general idea of whether or not an email address is good or if it bounces back, that sort of thing. And that's one of the reasons why we're changing systems, because we want to make sure that we're reaching people in various different modes and not just relying on email. Mm-hmm. Email is, not to belabor this, but email is tenuous at best because it ends up in spam or it's bounced back or people change addresses. So we're going to start to roll out that new communications plan shortly. And so we're going to start to reach out to parents by phone or by mail to get their updated information, both phone and so on and so forth. So I would look forward to seeing a plan shortly.
Okay, and with that, so if we're going to be reaching out by phone and things like that, is that one of the areas that we're going to be working on with getting the other responses that we didn't get to the return to school plan? Is that one avenue that we're looking at to reach out to those families?
Yeah, I think Mrs. Counters talked about that, right? So I think we're looking at sending paper out or possibly phone calls, that sort of thing. So
We're making
phone calls.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And then to piggyback on Dave's comment about families having question, I know we all are getting inundated with information about like what a student's day is going to look like when they go back. And Mrs. Connors, you did an amazing job with all of your work that you did, all of the meetings you set up, all the Zooms. I mean, absolutely outstanding, phenomenal, hit it out of the park. But questions I know that I'm getting are like, are kids going to be able to have school supplies or like scrap paper to do work? Is it all going to be on the computer? You know, and what about those students who are more a hands-on learner? You know, those are some of the questions that we'll have to answer.
And those are some of the ones through our frequently asked questions document that we're putting together, Phil, and we are doing that. It's taking us a lot longer to get through. There's hundreds of questions, so we're trying to group them now.
I mean, even me, I'm just thinking like I'm trying to work on math and I have to write it down. I have to write it down on pen and paper.
There will be school supplies. They are going to be, we're not going to have all of our families bring them in. We are going to provide them. Each student will have their own box or whatever to keep them in, plastic bin. There will be no book bags. I know that's been a big one for our families, like Dom talked about a little earlier. So there are some things that as we're getting them put together, we're making sure that's in our version 1.1 that was posted the other day.
Okay. And then I'm also getting questions from parent groups. I'm friends with a lot of people in the parents groups, and they're getting inundated with requests about, you know, back to school and book fairs and things like that. Are we communicating with those parent groups about the return to school and the functions that we normally put on that we're not doing this year?
That is a great one that we can do a better job with. So thank you for bringing that one up.
Okay. And then I also, Brenda, wanted to piggyback with thanking Officer Hutchinson for his dedication to our district, both working as an SRO, coaching. I really hope, you know, whatever sports tend to look like, he will consider, you know, partnering with us and doing that and being a member of our community, because he was so highly valued and thought so highly with all of our students, and he really made that connection. I'm sad to see him go, but I would like to personally just thank him for helping me out with a million questions and taking time out of his day for every student and staff member. And really, we're going to miss him. And that's it for me.
So I guess I'll start with the SROs. I'm grateful for all the SROs that we partnered with over the years and the police department for that partnership. But most recently, Officer Hutch, great job. You know, his face will be missed, I'm sure. Next, I want to again thank Mrs. Connors. Those focus groups, I agree, knocked it out of the park. Lots of questions. People are looking for very specific answers that the district does not have. I can promise you, I listened over and over and over, and I wouldn't even say all the overs again. As soon as the district has answers, they will be shared. And I know that's frustrating many parents and students, because they want the specifics and we just don't have them yet. But as soon as we have them, I'm confident they will be shared. No one's withholding. We just don't have them to share. I also want to thank all of our administrators. They have been working tirelessly. Well, no, they're tired, and rightfully so. They have been working hours over normal work days. They've been working more work days than normal, trying to pull together a very sensible, safe plan to address all the needs of our students. And again, I ask for people's patience. If you're frustrated, please take a breath. We owe them that much. We owe them to take a breath and give them the space they need to get their work done. They are really, really trying. If they weren't, I would be shouting very loud. And I think that there's people that could attest to that. Lastly, again, my thanks to our partners with our construction project. They were very good at listening to what we had to say. They asked very good questions to make certain that they understood the board's direction. And they too were very kind and said they understood why we had to make the changes that we did, which was very helpful, I think, to Nick and I to know that we got our point across. And thank you to our superintendent for his continued willingness to take on a lot of questions and not lose it with us, just working in partnership. And again, my thanks to everyone in the school community and in the greater community. This is a partnership of many partners, and we will continue to work that way. And we will continue to work very hard to make certain we're communicating and we're transparent in all of our discussions and decision-making. So with that said, I would like to ask someone to move item 7.02.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Okay, Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Elmore,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper, Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeJorme,
Yes.
Okay, so folks, will 5 minutes do it? Then we can come back and finish up. All right, 5-minute break. We're going to come back, folks, and we're going to take care of some business and executive session. And thank you all for those that tuned in. We're always grateful for viewership. And have a good evening and enjoy the rest of your week.
Okay. Tim is on, so that means I believe we are ready to go.
Okay, so it would be item number 7.03. Would someone move it?
Move it.
Second.
Okay, and any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. I'll count hands. 1, 2. Okay, unanimous. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening, rest of your evening, and a better week. Take care.
All right. Thank you, everyone.